On that note, I just started the recording.
Good deal. All right.
So, as always, I'm going to start with a mindfulness practice.
Mhm.
I had one so I haven't premeditated any of them yet, but there's one that I was going to share because I thought Eli was going to be with us, but I'm going to save that one
Okay.
because I think he'll really get a kick out of it.
Yeah. All right. Okay.
And I would like it to be something that he partakes in with us.
Right.
Um, just just because I think he'll get something out of it. But this one, I'm going to do another one that's similar to the one I was going to do with Eli.
Mm.
And this is more of a meditation practice. And
Okay.
I would say it's a type of mindfulness. It falls within that realm. But the other ones have been focused a little more on breathing. And this one, it's more of like a mental exercise of awareness.
Okay. I got you.
So we will start with just a couple of deep breaths just to relax the body, like get that reset, make it feel. It's kind of like stretching. So we'll just
Right.
take 2 big inhales and exhale. And another big inhale. And then sigh out as you relax. Okay, and now as you're sitting comfortably and breathing, take all of your awareness and your focus and attention and notice every hair on your head. And keep your attention on all of the individual hairs all at once. And as your mind wanders, bring it back to trying to hold attention to each individual strand and where they connect to the scalp. And as your mind wanders, bring the attention back, noticing all of your hair. And we'll take 2 more mindful breaths as we transition out. What did you think of that exercise?
That was pretty neat. I can't say I've ever heard of that one before.
It's definitely a little different.
Yeah.
Um,
Most certainly.
the first time I heard of that one, I tried doing it and I was like, whoa, this is something I've never tried. Like,
It was difficult.
hearing about it is one thing, but like trying it, yeah, it's super difficult.
Oh yeah.
And that's one of the reasons I think it's kind of a fun exercise to just challenge yourself and be like, whoa, okay, if I'm going to be able to do this, I've got to really sit still.
Right.
You can't be like half present. You have to be fully present to get that one done.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
um, which I think I like it because it's different.
That's what I was gonna say. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's refreshing compared to other, meditation
Right, right.
techniques.
It has a totally different style to it. That
Right.
it's you're not like taking out your toolkit from the other ones and like, okay, here we go. This is going to be just like a slight adjustment. It's like, no, this
Yeah.
one's a
Right.
bit different. You use the same foundation, but it's a little different. So I'm happy to discuss the first chapter of the Four Agreements if that's where you want to start, or we could take this in whatever direction and just do our thing like we always do.
Right. Yeah. I'm good with whatever. I mean, did you have anything in mind that you were
Um,
really wanting to talk
well,
about?
just based on like the brief conversation we had before we started recording, like I've been thinking about a lot of different things on, I'll say, different levels of existence, where
Mm-hmm.
social interactions and like human interactions, as well as biology and physiology, and then things like chemistry and down to the like the molecular level, and then physics. And I've been just like running up and down that ladder a lot lately.
Right.
So I wouldn't mind jumping into some of our conversations about like quantum reality or like the double slit and things like that if you're in the mood for it. But I
Yeah.
also
Oh,
happy to explore this book and the different levels of that.
sure. I mean, it's funny. I was watching a bunch of videos on particle physics last night,
Nice.
so I've got all that fresh in my mind.
Awesome. What was one of the main takeaways?
Um, it was pretty much like, do you know particle accelerators?
Yeah, they're huge,
Like,
right?
yeah, like the big thing where they smash protons into each other.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, or neutrons and stuff like that. I was watching how those work in like the breakdown of uh, baryons and stuff, which are protons and neutrons and like quarks and what they're made of. But one of the things that I thought was interesting was they were asking like these particle physicists different like philosophical questions, and one of them was if the universe was to start again like another Big Bang, would the universal constants be the same or different?
Hmm. That's an
Like
excellent question.
yeah, like Planck's constant and the speed of light or whatever. And it's interesting to think about like a whole different existence where elementary physics is just tweaked by one value and it could change everything.
Well, I don't know enough of the math to make this claim with any weight, but more as like a curiosity
Hmm.
that I wonder if these constants would be the same in a different solar system with different planets and atmospheric pressures and like compounds and elements.
Yeah, that's kind of one of
That
the
like
ways that I was
within the
thinking
same
about it.
universe that we have, following if the Big Bang is how it happened, following that, like what if there's already different constants
Yeah, right. I was gonna
elsewhere?
say, what if everything is just, you know, maybe the values are changing all the time and it's just our perception
Yeah.
of the change as one uniform thing.
And
So,
that was one of the things that I kind of like after reflecting on my talk with Will was there's there's two different types of truths. There's subjective truths and then
mhm.
there's objective truth. And I'm basing this off of this was my reflection. I'm not
Right.
saying that I like yes, and science has shown or this person researched. Nope, this is just me spitting it at
Hmm.
what my head was spinning on recently. But subjective truths. So like, let's say you and I both go to a movie together, and we watch the movie and we walk out. We each have a different perception and a different experience that we had of that movie, and both of those are true.
Mhm.
What I experienced in that movie,
Yep.
how I
Yep.
felt, what I thought about it. That is my truth. And I could have the truth of that was a terrible movie and I didn't like any of it. That is my truth. That was for real. And you could have that was an awesome movie and I was like super excited through the whole thing. And that could be your truth. Or we could both agree on whatever and those are our truths still, but they're still
Right.
subjective. Whether you agree or disagree, it is a truth for like from the perspective.
Mhm.
Um, and then there's objective truths that it doesn't matter who's looking at it from what angle, it is the truth.
Yep.
And I was thinking about how that ties in with the different things of like observing in quantum mechanics and quantum physics. How as soon as you place an observer, the interactions change.
Right.
Where it's like, is that the realm of subjective truth? And
That's yeah.
objective
Right.
truth is outside of observation. As soon as you observe it, it becomes subjective.
Mhm.
And there's a
Oh,
different set
interesting.
of laws that apply to objective
Huh.
truths versus subjective truths
Right.
because things behave in a different way. And this is something that I wonder if just most people I've talked to didn't learn enough about quantum physics to be like, oh, wow, that's weird. um, because to me, it's like, what do you mean if we're not observing it? It's a wave, it's
Ooh.
energy, it's not
Sorry, bro. You cut out
particles.
for a sec there.
Oh, your volume just went up and down too. But just
Really? Okay,
just talking about
we're good
things
now.
like what the double slit experiment showed. And when you're observing, it's particles. When there is no observer, it's waves. Um,
Yeah, right.
and that trips me out. That's hard
Hmm.
to sit with and be like, oh, that makes sense. Like,
Yeah, it's
okay, I can follow what you're showing me, and it's very consistent. So it's like I understand the idea, but the why behind that and the what's happening here that leads to this. Oh, I don't have that answer
right.
yet.
It's illogical. It doesn't, I don't know if we can find a way to rationalize that.
I think the reason that it's so hard for me is because all of my conscious, like waking life, I spent interacting with the particles.
Hmm.
I use my sight to navigate. I use my feel to navigate. Like I'm immersed in. I'm navigating through my existence with these particles from my observation stance. That's what
Hmm.
my consciousness knows. That it's hard for me to be like, oh, and when I'm not doing this, because when I'm not doing that, I don't have conscious awareness of what I'm doing, that
Right.
it changes. And it's like, um, that's like assuming that everything in the room behind you disappears when you don't look at it, and then you have to
Right.
turn back around for it to reappear. And I'm like, yeah, sure, I can see it in the camera here, but like, it's very strange.
It's really weird, and I've thought about it a little bit, and I don't think about it often, but it's because, like I said, it leads back to general relativity. I just think that there's so many, like infinitely many possibilities of what everything can do all at once that I'm just like, I can't. I'm gonna look at other
System
stuff.
overload.
Kinda. It's more of just like, okay, to pick apart this, I'm just like, I can't do it.
Yeah, it would take a ton of work,
Yeah.
and you still might not get there.
Right.
You'll just probably get more questions. Um, uh, Something that this just made me think of is I was talking to your mom last night. We were just having a conversation, and one of the things we were talking about is like intelligence and exploring intelligent ideas and things like that, and
Right.
how it had framed out of, and I'm pretty sure you could ask anyone in my immediate family, they would agree. But it seemed that I was more intelligent. I was the most intelligent out of our core group. Like out of the five of us, I was thinking about deeper level things more often.
Right.
No value of is that better than what, like anything like that. Just
Oh
like
yeah, I
that was a
understand. Yeah.
happenstance for me, is I was thinking about these things in different ways than they were.
Hmm.
And um, something that I said is like, but I faced like through maybe in my family interactions, but also social interactions a lot, especially in school. Of school was easy for me. I could get the answers. I could get good grades. And with that, I think people assumed that life was easier.
Mm.
And I brought up my all time favorite Einstein quote. He has a bunch of wonderful quotes. But my all time favorite Einstein quote is along the lines of, if you ever like believe that you have troubles with math, I assure you mine are far greater.
Yep. Yep.
And the reason that that's my favorite Einstein quote out of all the things he has said is because that one shows that just because you figured more out doesn't mean you're closer to the answer in a way that's like helps you.
Oh yeah, I think we've talked about this. You brought up to me, people say, "Oh, I wish I was as smart as Einstein." And he was like, "Yeah, but if you were doing like the math that I'm doing is really hard."
Right.
And like,
Right. He was struggling more with what he was trying to do than the average person, than I struggle with math, because I don't try and do that hard of stuff.
hmm,
Like,
right?
he was literally like going into the unknown and
I was gonna
exploring
say,
things that didn't have foundation.
yeah, he faced the impossible daily just with his work.
Yeah. And then another thing that I find awesome about Einstein is he found it incredibly peculiar and like almost comical, but even a nuisance that everyone saw him as this like great smart person.
Yeah, right.
where he was always just like, "What do you mean everyone's talking about me as the smartest guy in the world?" He's like, "I'm just curious and trying to figure this stuff out. Like,
Hmm.
go live your life. Go try and answer some questions you have. Like, why is everyone looking at me? This is silly."
Right. He's like, I'm struggling to figure out what I'm doing still. Like,
Right. He didn't have this sense of like, oh, I've gotten these answers, so now I'm confident in everything and I hold this over like I know I'm better than anyone else. He was like, nope, not at all. Like
right.
you're all being really silly right
It's like I
now.
learned this thing and it gets worse.
Right. Right. And I realized it's way messier than I
Oh yeah.
thought. And that's I think that's something that comes with like you have people who show confidence in something until they start to get really good at it and then they
Hmm.
become humbled by it.
Yeah.
That it's like someone who's really good at something is usually not arrogant. They're usually fairly humble. And
Yeah.
occasionally you could find someone who's arrogant and also really good at something, but I think they have a different dysfunction driving them.
Uh,
But
yeah.
for the most part, once someone really learns about something, in my experience, they become humble because they realize they don't know a damn about it.
Oh
It's
yeah.
way deeper than what they've accessed, and they're deeper than most. Which is it's a really funny phenomenon to experience. It's like it doesn't get simpler, and this is another thing. Just talking about the like quirks that you brought up.
Hmm.
Um, Will had talked about if you understand that level, maybe you can understand all of it. And then my question was like, is that the base? And he was like, well, I guess they are finding subatomic particles now,
Like
where something below quarks.
what?
And I expect that to continue ad infinitum. I don't think people are going to be like, we found the base. I think we're too big to find the true base, and I think we're
I
too
mean,
small to find the expansive side. Like it's relative to our perspective. I don't
right.
unless we have some incredible advancements in our abilities to perceive and also measure things. I don't think we're going to get much below subatomic particles, but we'll probably get there in time.
Right. I mean, like, as much as I want to believe that we will, and how cool it would be, I'm gonna have to agree with you. I don't think we're ever gonna find like, oh, this is the string of the universe.
I don't think it exists.
At least not in the way that we can
I don't
conceptualize.
I
Because I
don't think
think
there's a finish line.
that's true. Because I mean, I think we can understand forces well, and I think that's all we really need.
Oh, we definitely have more than like advanced enough understanding of the things we need to navigate this
Oh yeah.
world. Um, but I would argue that it's not enough. People don't seem to be like jumping with joy everywhere you turn, going, "This is amazing."
Oh, it'll never be enough.
I think that there's still this longing for more. As much as you can hit every luxury of the first world countries, you're still going to be wanting more. There's something missing. And then I
Right.
think we, just based on what we've been taught, go look into material things or into relationships or somewhere else for that stuff. Um, that I do agree that we have a very good understanding of the physical world and forces and things like that, which is very convenient, and we've created some really cool things
Very
because of it.
convenient.
Um, like we have some incredible machines we're using to communicate with right now
Oh yeah.
in real time.
Right. And I can get up and move around. There's nothing attaching
Right?
this to this.
And that's really cool, and that's I think stems straight out of us understanding the physical reality we're in. But again, back to what I started with, I think that's a subjective truth. And then there's the realm outside of that. And I don't know if that's something that can consciously ever be explored or not because of the nature of it. uh,
Right.
but I definitely like trying to like press my face up against the glass and peek in there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, that's why I'm so interested in particle physics. I'm like, all right, what's next? Come on, how does this like
Right.
they gave it was a really great analogy that kind of put it all together for me. Do you mind if I explain real quick?
I'd love you to.
Good. Okay. So the Large Hadron Collider, you shoot protons at each other in a beam, and it's like some insane number of collisions a second, but it's incredibly precise. And what it's like is trying to reverse engineer a car by like smashing two of them into each other over and over again. And I thought that was such a neat way of describing it, because it's true. Like once I started watching the videos, I'm like, oh my god, they're right. Like that's what they're doing.
And that I feel like that should lead to some healthy level of skepticism
Right.
of like,
And that's
this is the best way we have of measuring it, so I'm gonna take your
right.
findings for what they're worth. Like,
So
definitely better
what
than what I'm doing, but it's gonna
right.
be really
So the
hard to figure
thing
out how a car works by smashing it into another car.
that's true. And you know, like when you smash a car into another car, parts fly off and things
Hmm.
break because the momentum or the energy is God, what's it called? Conserved.
Right.
But in particle physics, the momentum and energy is not conserved. It's called elastic deformation. And or maybe don't quote me, but what happens is these little subatomic particles really hate being apart from each other. So instead of like they smash and then they just bounce off and reform somewhere else, really weird stuff happens with
And because they're trying to come back together.
well, because they're trying to come back together or trying to stay together. Like one thing is the energy from the
Right. The
collision.
bonds that hold them together are stronger than the forces pushing them out, even though they get really far from each other, and they still want to
Mhm.
come back.
Yeah, so there's different types of things. There's baryons, which are made up of 3 quarks, and then there's another one which is made up of 2. And so sometimes if you shoot like 2 with 3 at each other, you'll get 3 separate of the groups of 2 quarks, because the energy will like actually manifest into a physical quark instead of having it bounce off. It'll just the energy will turn into a quark and pair with another so that they can stay together.
Weird.
Yeah, isn't that weird? Oh,
That's
it's so
super
okay. Well, now I
weird.
have to. Yeah,
Huh.
yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, what's the mechanism that allows for, oh, we're just going to convert energy into this?
Right, exactly. Well, so that's the big thing with the Higgs boson particle. It was that energy turning into mass or turning into matter, so to
Right.
speak, type thing.
So, and that's essentially the difference between the the observed versus not observed
Hmm.
realities. That it was like a forced switch between the two.
Right.
Like we put so much energy that like some of it like bloop blipped through the side.
Oh yeah, it was like I'm reading about this right now because I want to get you the verbatim quote that I saw, but it's incredible. Can lambdas, yeah.
And it's funny to think about like we live in a very funny time in the history of the world
Yeah, we do.
where like that's people were putting a lot of resources into smashing those things together.
Oh yeah. I mean, I would love to. That'd be an amazing job for me.
um, and I'm not belittling that I don't want to call it career, that pursuit.
Field of
Um,
study.
sure, and but then there's things like, for me, what if that's all the pyramids were? It was like some big science experiment, like the NASA of the time was trying to conduct.
Okay, all right.
Because like if you were to find the like these particle accelerators 100 years from now, with no one explaining to you what it was, to try and figure out what those things are, these giant like
Right.
mile long loops of like billions of wires of all different sizes and shapes, very precisely placed where
Mhm.
they are, like that would be a very confusing thing to come upon,
Right?
to
Yeah.
try and
Because
figure out what it is. And you would have to assume like something of this magnitude must have been very important to the people, when
right.
it's like you talk to the average person, they don't know anything about Higgs boson. Like they're like,
Yep.
what
Right.
are you talking about? And not to say that I know much at all about it. Like if you were to randomly plop me in the middle of one, I might not know where I am. Like because it would look strange. I've never been to one of them to like see the different parts of that anyway. Like, sure, I've seen videos, but I haven't seen the entirety of one of those. I'll call it a facility, but that's a bastardizing
I mean,
term.
it's a pretty good
But I
term.
think that that's something where we are putting a lot of like communal resources into something that the majority of the population aren't really attending to, don't seem to be affected by.
I suppose so, but I
And
mean,
not to say that there won't be a breakthrough and it'll revolutionize everyone's life,
mhm,
but day to day, that's not, I don't think, benefiting many people. You could get rid of it, and most people would not have any change in their normal functioning,
right.
which is, if you look at the scale of the amount of energy and research and finances and just resources going into,
Oh yeah. The
it's
amount of
it's pretty
stuff that
silly.
goes into this one thing that's managed by like, probably less than 1,000 people.
Right. That's pretty funny.
Yeah.
But also really cool about it, those are like 1,000 of some of the smartest people around.
Oh yeah.
Like they are an elite.
Right.
And
And
I mean, I'm sure some of them have a chip on their shoulder, an edge to them. But for the most part, I think they're just a bunch of people who are really passionate about science.
right.
Like
Right.
they're hardcore nerds. I love
Yeah, I was gonna.
that.
If you care enough about something, what's to stop you from learning everything about it?
Yeah, by any means, you are going to try and know more because you like it.
Hence, smashing cars together to figure out how they work. Even though that's like a terribly inefficient way to figure out how a car works, if it's the best you have.
Right. And we've never done it before, so let's try it.
Yeah, right.
I
But I
followed
so I
this
sent
much
you
of the math, so let's see what happens.
right. Yeah, I sent you one of the videos I watched last night, and this is the one. It's kind of on a more of a surface level understanding
Okay,
of it, but
I'll stick it up here later.
right, yeah, the part it's like 40 seconds, and that's when he talks about like energy turning into things.
All right. Yeah, no, I'll definitely take a look at that.
Oh yeah,
I'm I'm just spinning in my head about is that because they were observing on such a small level that their consciousness was able to influence it, or was it because they're working on such a small level that there's so many minute switches between the two at that level
right,
that they're able to see some of them and measure some of those switches?
right, because that's when you get into that level of thinking is that one because of the observation, but like when you have these millions of collisions a second, are they being directly observed? Because all it is a monitor, and you're just watching pings on the gold foil being hit. Like you're not watching the collision happen per se, but it's too much for me to I can't articulate right now.
No, it's pretty
Really.
awesome.
Oh yeah. Anyway, that's what I've been doing.
Nice. I like that.
Oh yeah.
Will brought up something, and he asked me if I was familiar with van der Waals forces.
Van der
Um,
Waals.
and my response to him was no, at least not by name. And then I looked them up, and I'm familiar with the
Van der
concept.
Waals.
I didn't know that he was, and his name or whatever was responsible for that many of the different levels of it. But
Yeah,
it's
so
just,
what
it's essentially the
oh, how geckos can walk along walls and ceilings.
so oh huh huh it would apply to that. That's
Yeah,
neat. Yeah, that was not where my head was when I was gonna
well, I went
explain
to
it.
the Wikipedia page and that was the first thing.
But yeah, it's essentially the it's polarity.
Oh, it's like ionic. Oh, they differ from covalent and ionic bonds.
Right. It's they're weaker forces than those
It's the
bonds.
weakest of the weak chemical forces.
Right. It is
Interesting.
it's it's essentially the polarity on the sublevels based on like
Hmm.
the movement of electrons in the different electron fields.
Okay, so like potentially the charge of an up quark versus an anti-up quark, maybe? Because
I'm
they have a
not familiar
positive.
with quarks enough, but I could use
Well,
a
they have
water
a.
molecule as an example. Of you know how a single water molecule you have two hydrogen, one oxygen,
Hmm.
and that molecule is balanced because the two hydrogen are each -1 and the oxygen's +2.
Oh, it's the same principle. It's just like different
But
quarks have like, oh,
since they're kind of skewed to one side because you have the other electrons from the oxygen over here, you have oxygen in the middle, and then you have a hydrogen, and then you have your other free floating oxygen, not free floating, but like the
right,
other electrons that were attached to the oxygen atom. It creates the pluses are on this side and there's a minus on this side, even though
hmm,
that the unit itself is balanced. So then when it gets near another water molecule, if it's oriented in the right direction, the hydrogens will be away from each other and it'll kind of like link together. And that's why water's polar. That's why it beads up. That's why you can siphon water, because it
interesting.
has these
Okay,
polar traits.
right.
And that's part of the van der Waals forces. And I guess there's different levels of that as well. But that was something that
Hmm.
I've been looking at recently is like there's you you can't escape the different like relationships, I'll call them, on any level, because as soon as you try and go deeper you find out that there was more shooting out to the side everywhere you go,
Mm.
where it's like, oh well, this is balanced, and it's like, well actually it's only looking like it's balanced, but then there's another layer of balance based on these other things that are imbalanced,
Right.
like
Yeah.
each time you go down, that it's like you have all of these moving pieces all of the time that for whatever reason an analogy keeps popping into my head over the last few days and I can't figure out what it's going to apply to, but I
Mm.
keep thinking of if you're like driving down the road and you look at the car next to you, depending on the style of their hubcaps and their speed, you can look at the spinning on their tire and it either looks like it's going forward or it's going really slowly forward, or sometimes
Right. Right.
there's an illusion of it going backwards. And the same if you like spin a top that has a certain design on it, it'll appear to be rotating and you watch it and then it appears to like slow down and then it appears to be still for a second even though you know it's still spinning, and
Hmm.
then the pattern appears to go in the reverse order and then like speed up and then like slow down and then like switch back the other way. Do you know what I'm referring to?
Hmm. Yeah.
Those types of things, it's like it's an illusion of motion or of stillness that happen at different levels throughout motion. So like as you increase the speed of that spinning thing, it changes the the illusion of what it's presenting, of which direction it appears to be spinning, of how fast it appears to be spinning, or if it appears to be still.
Mm. My take on that is like, and not to belittle your observation, but it's like I don't put a whole lot of weight into that because for me it doesn't, it doesn't change the I'll say the objective truth that it's spinning counterclockwise
Right.
like at
And
45 miles an hour.
oh, go on. And then I have a rebuttal.
No, I mean that's it. That's the
Well,
gist.
just I totally agree. It does not change the truth of what the actual speed is of that thing. But the observation of it
Right, the perception.
could even appear to be the opposite. It could appear to be nothing. It appears as if it's not spinning at all, or it appears that it's going in the opposite direction, or anywhere in between of different speeds. That
Right.
it hits all these different phases that have an illusory pattern to them.
Right. So I have two thoughts on that. The first one is I think that applies if you don't have prior knowledge of this object, like you don't know how it started, then your perception's thrown off. But if you do, you'd be like, okay, I just know, how I look at it doesn't matter. It's always spinning this way. But then my second thought is that can lead into particle physics. Like if our perception is the opposite of what is actually going on, then what is all of this based on,
Right.
What is
And
the
like you said,
objective
you have to
truth
have
of
prior knowledge, and I'm pretty sure we
Right,
don't.
yeah. I don't know. Yeah, these are new discoveries, and it's not like we've.
We understand all of it because we don't. There would be no way to, like,
Okay, an
we're figuring it
interesting
out. That's
way to.
something that's been coming up for me a lot. Is like there's this motion, but observers are so easily fooled
Right,
constantly.
I like that's an interesting thought. I really enjoy that because if you have something physical like this, I mean, well, it's moving, but it's slow. We can take it, pick it apart, see its reactions, its melting point, all of its, you know, chemical properties. But when you have something that small and that fast moving, where all you get is your one glimpse of perception at it,
Right.
it's heavy
And
stuff.
and you're usually not going to question if your perception's accurate. You assume it's accurate
Right.
because
Yeah.
that's convenient.
It's what's like,
It's
that's
what
how you've learned
works.
your entire
Yeah.
life.
If you questioned if your perception was wrong all the time, you wouldn't get anything done.
Right.
And you would never move in the same direction. Like that. So you have to make that assumption to navigate life,
Hmm.
but it might be wrong.
Oh, it could totally be
All
wrong
of
in
the
so many.
time
Yeah.
too.
Oh, yeah.
You could constantly be being fooled. And that was another one. I think it was an Einstein quote of like him talking about how like I don't know if he said life or reality or something is all an illusion one, albeit a very consistent or convincing one, something along those lines.
Yeah, I've heard that quote. I like that quote.
It's pretty interesting. Where it's like I I can sit with
Yeah, it's
that
like I
thought
can
and
see that. Yeah.
yep. Where it's like there's a lot of consistencies. There's a lot that I can predict and have some high level of assurance that things will happen a certain way.
Hmm.
And if you understand things well enough, you can measure things to be very precise.
Oh, yeah.
In so many different factions, but I'll use like just chemical reactions can be timed down to like milliseconds. And you can mix certain ratios of things as long as you measure accurately enough, you can mix them together, set a timer, and say exactly at that point it's going to change, and it does. Like, you can do those calculations if you understand the math, but at the same time, like, there might be something totally different going on underneath that's like ruling all of these functions
Right. And
that
so that's
I'm oblivious to because I'm thinking it's going like it's not spinning when actually it's spinning really
right.
fast.
I think it's kind of along that line. I think about chemical reactions in that way. Like, you take something like high level chemistry that is incredibly precise, which I mean, it might be, but then how much wiggle room is there in the actual bonding of these atoms and electrons that, like, you can't measure out the exact same amount every time. It's going to be different. And on a subatomic scale, like one
Right.
micron
But
of
if you look at the
substance.
scale of, let's say, time that you're using to measure in comparison, you're not going to be that close and that precise on like the microseconds or whatever. That's not a real time.
I
um,
mean, I know
but
what you mean.
like on the same scale of the atoms that you're measuring, you're going to be way off on that level of time comparison or whatever you're comparing it to. So you're not going to measure the exact amount each time, but it could be close enough for the window that you're measuring in, if that
Oh
makes
yeah, no,
sense.
that's what I'm saying. Sorry if I phrased it weird, but I'm wondering, how big is that window for each thing? Because
Yeah,
relatively, if you
yeah.
think about it, if you think to how small like the subatomic particles that we've discovered are on that scale, it's kind of a significant jump.
Oh, yeah. We're probably off by a lot on that
Oh yeah, and
level.
so I'm like, how
But
loosely does everything have to fit together for it to be this consistent?
it's a matter of what level of precision you're looking for.
I suppose so.
and perspective you're looking from, I think would also probably play into it.
I agree, and that makes me think that
I guess
us
the
as humans,
perspective would only just lead to you'd have to be able to process more information. If you could process more information, you could use a bigger. Like I could observe from way up here at things down here, but I have to fill in all those gaps. Where if I'm just doing this window, then I don't need as much information in between. So I guess that doesn't change with it.
right?
Maybe with that one
I mean,
idea.
yeah, who knows? But yeah.
I got a sleepy dog next to me. He's not sleeping.
Oh yeah.
Anymore,
Oh, hello. How's the new setup treating you?
though. Oh, it's working for now.
Yeah, good deal.
Yeah, I like it. I also like quantum contemplation.
Me too. It's the most fascinating thing for me ever, more than AI, more than computer science will ever be.
Really?
Yep, but that's why computer science is such a big thing for me because I mean that's one of the ways that we're measuring this stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Here's a question. Have you heard of the two computers talking to each other? Okay. Will
how do you
brought it
mean?
up, so I searched it, and I thought he was talking about something different than what I could find.
I mean, maybe in a general sense, that's really all Wi-Fi and Bluetooth is,
This is
talking to
different.
you.
Like they made their
You
own
know,
language to communicate.
oh, that's not
That was my understanding of it. It was like they created a language that they were communicating with, and I was like, that's really cool. I wonder what that's like. When I
that's
Googled
terrifying.
it, all I could find was there was some long thing where like these two chatbots on Facebook were talking to each other, and people started to freak out about that. I don't know if that's what he was referencing or not,
Maybe this,
but with the thing where the two Facebook chatbots were going at each
yeah,
other,
that's
that's
what I
all I
found.
could find. That's all I could
Yeah,
find. I'm like, I
is
don't know
this a
if that's
different
just because
thing?
this is what people were talking about on the internet, and then there's this other thing that Will knows about, or if that's what Will was referencing. So I need to ask him. But
Right,
the
that's what I'm.
Facebook chatbots, people started to freak out because they thought it was like this super advanced, like computer, like shortcut to communication. I would argue that it was actually instead of an evolution of computer communication, I would say it's a de-evolution because if you think about chatbots, they're pretty easy to fool. They're not foolproof. They're not
Mhm.
like the most advanced communicators. Amazing technology for sure. Like that's
Mhm.
incredible that you can have a computer respond to you fairly accurately most of the time. But they're not as accurate as a person, I would say. And they don't have this like they can't account for a glitch where let's say you and I are communicating and then all of a sudden like I sneeze or I misspeak or like something happens, we would rebalance and recalibrate after that.
Mhm.
Where I don't think a computer would. It would take that input and then act as if it was the truth of what was going on and then keep going. So now they're getting further and further off track rather than down a more advanced road. I think they're just kind of like going into like pretty soon it's just going to be the letter A that they just like
Mhm.
infinitely type. And they're not
Right.
meaning anything by it. It's just that's what it thinks is the appropriate response.
Yeah, that's what's making me.
That
As I'm
I
reading
wasn't
this,
like, oh god, look, this is crazy. They learned how to talk. I was like, no, they actually devolved, and now they're just it's gibberish with no meaning.
it's really cryptic and weird though to read
Sure, if you
the
think a person was
conversation.
saying it. I
That's
didn't read
true.
the conversation. I just read like a couple of lines of it, and it was like one of them was like to me, to me, to me, to me, to me, to
Yeah,
me,
that's.
and I was like, whatever.
People were thinking like, oh, is this a precursor to human speech? Like, oh, four to me's in a row means this, or I don't think
No,
that's. I
I
don't.
I would argue that was a de-evolution,
Yeah.
just glitches happening and confusing each other. Because
Right. I
if
don't
you send gibberish to it, it's gonna send gibberish back, and then it
because
got into like a feedback loop of garbage.
right, and this is the really black and white like joke version of how AI works. It's just a bunch of if else statements stacked on top of each other. It's like if this happens, do this, else do this. And it's like,
I mean, I'd say that's what we are too. Just on like a way more complex level of like there's a bunch of ifs all in the same else, and a bunch of else's all with the same if, depending on a bunch of variables, and like a lot of weird things happen for our interactions.
I suppose so.
But then something else that confuses the heck out of me. I really need to do some research on this. Hopefully, I can get someone who knows about this to talk to me about it.
Right.
DNA
DNA.
and how it's able to code all of this information for us to be created. Like, here are the blueprints and this tiny little stuff, and it's like, I'm a pretty big dude. And all of my body parts work in conjunction with each other.
All of my body parts work.
Like, that's insane. Like, what? That is like some seriously complex, in detail, but like programmed very like compactly.
Right. So that
It's
brings up
not
the
like a
argument.
huge hard drive that's running
Yeah.
it. It's like, oh, it's your brain. Like, no, I don't think my brain is what developed my brain and my body.
Right.
There's this little bit of code, like these tiny two little cells that weren't even complete, stick together, and then they've got everything it needs to like do all of this, and it does all of it by like breaking down other organic matter and reconstructing it.
That makes me
What?
think of the surface area versus volume argument. You know,
What
if you
argument?
think about how much like the more surface area something has, the more information it can store, or something like that. You know, just how much can be stored and how little.
Okay.
And I wonder what, because I mean, to an extent, you could say we're self-replicating as a single
Oh,
person,
definitely.
and it's like what. You know, we can't have all of the possibilities stored in here for us to develop. There has to be. Well, I mean, maybe we can. I don't.
It
I don't
doesn't.
know.
It doesn't seem like it because people look very similar to their parents.
I'll say it seems improbable.
Yeah.
I'll say.
It also seems impractical. Imagine every like all of a sudden like two black people have a white baby or an Asian baby. Like that's weird.
Right. And
Yeah.
like, you know, I can bend my finger this way or this way or this way. It's like what?
Or backward. Like yeah. I don't think
How
that
is
I don't think everything would be packed into the
how is
program.
all of this gray area coded in? Maybe it's not. Maybe it's something else. More than likely, but I mean,
Yeah. No, it's pretty silly. And then the fact of like I was thinking about this the other day. I was eating some food because I was like, man, I don't feel hungry, but I know I like I'm not craving any food, but I have
mhm.
that sense that like I should probably eat or I'm gonna like not feel good soon.
Right.
So I was like, let me get some food, and as I was preparing it, I was thinking, I'm like, this is pretty weird that my body's gonna break this down on like a really tiny scale into
Hmm.
really tiny building blocks and then reconstruct more of me. And anything it doesn't need goes in the waste bin. Like that's pretty incredible.
Right.
And that was lunch for me yesterday.
Interesting. It's
It's
like
just like holy cow, my body's pretty incredible.
right. That that makes me think of the whole wiggle room argument again. Like, how loosely does everything have to fit together for it still to be perceivable and logical and coherent for us?
Yeah. And like those are some pretty small building blocks my body's dealing with.
Oh yeah.
And the funny thing is, like when I think about that stuff, I think about like how the fact that I'm a giant. Like I don't know how many people go through that. And I don't mean
Yeah.
compared to people. I mean like the size of the structure that's being supported in comparison to the blocks used to build it. I
Oh
am
yeah.
massive.
Oh yeah.
Like holy cow, huge.
It's incredible.
And constantly working to self-preserve and self-maintain and self-repair anything going on, like, and grow. It's it's an incredible machine that I have the luxury of hanging out in all the time.
Right? Maybe it's just one long chain reaction that took an incredible amount of energy to start, and that's human life.
I don't disagree with that.
Hmm.
I definitely think there's always predetermined or pre-existing factors that lead to something else.
Oh yeah, but I mean,
Like you have to have something that comes before, or you wouldn't be here.
right.
Um, but it does seem, yeah, like I've always kind of used the perspective of, I like you use chain reaction. I always use chemical reaction
I
because
was gonna say maybe
that's what I knew more. But chain reaction, kind of like domino effect.
that's what I was. Something was set in motion, and
Right.
that's how our bodies are able to grow and develop, and
And it's like
everything
you
else is
get
just.
this many domino pieces to stack up, stack them in any way you want. But each time this happens, or this pattern shows up, you lose a piece. Or if this
Hmm.
pattern shows up, you gain some. But you can't
Right.
go past this limit. And if this pattern shows up, they get cancer and kill themselves by over expanding, like, because you're not allowed
Hmm.
to pass this limit. So you just like a big block and then it stops the reaction. I don't know, like,
Hmm.
yeah, it's pretty funny how. So here's something that's, I still don't know what to think about it. I've
Hmm.
had some of, like, I've seen, not recently because I just have too many gray hairs to pay any attention to it, but when I was like college age, I had found different gray hairs that were half gray.
Huh.
So it was, but I found them in the reverse where they were gray and now they were no longer growing in gray. It wasn't like, oh, this was a black hair and then I grew this far and then the roots went gray. It was, this was a gray hair and it grew
Hmm.
this far and now the roots are black again. And I'm like, what the heck genes are turning on and off for that to happen? Like, is
Yeah.
this something in my diet that I changed that is like,
It's.
oh, we're reversing your aging? Or is it like, I don't know that gray hair has to do with melanin or not. That's the pigment like in your skin.
Hmm.
As you get tan, um, or having brown eyes, you have melanin in your eyes. I don't know that that has to do with gray hair. I haven't really looked that up, which I think I've like tried looking it up, and there's a lot of different beliefs on it.
On hair color or gray
On
hair?
gray hair, on why
Okay.
your hair goes gray.
Hmm.
Um, I haven't found anything where I'm like, oh, that's the science of it, and that makes sense. Like
I
this
mean,
person figured it out.
my first uneducated guess is that gray is just the natural color of all hair of this specific chemical composition of like, you know, dead carbon
So,
and
of
mixed with
hair devoid
nitrogen
of
and.
pigment.
Hmm.
Hmm,
That's my reasoning.
I
Because
like
if you
that
take
one.
like a piece of leather, like a glove, and you use it over and over again, the color's gonna wear off, and it's just gonna be this weird thing. If it's all cow leather and it was like you have three strips that originally painted, they're probably gonna look the same after like 30 years of use.
Yeah. Hmm, I like that. I'm gonna explore that.
Yeah, right.
Funny. Life is strange.
Oh, it's so weird.
But yeah, started out in quantum contemplation, and now we're down to biological, physiological contemplation.
It happened all without a thought,
I
or
think
many.
I had many, yeah.
I was gonna say, I'll say this: no intention of going in any
Right,
specific
wasn't
direction. Yeah,
premeditated, at least that I know of.
there you go.
But again, that's why I love these talks with you. We can just explore stuff and find
Hmm.
out that it's like, wow, we just talked about some funky stuff
Yep.
by having conversation with no
Right.
intention of like, this is what I want to talk to you about. Like,
Hmm.
we have those talks too, but that's totally different.
Right. It's not just like, oh, how was your day? Yeah. Good.
Right. Well, we have that talk where it's like, hey, what's going on? And next thing you know, we're talking about
True.
like how our body's breaking down proteins and amino acids.
All subjective things.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't. I still. I have a lot to figure out on that front.
I mean, I'm not gonna say I've made my decision because I know very little right now. But for now, I'm just gonna let it happen. There's too many variables. It's not like there's only two sides of this coin. There's like
Right.
infinitely many,
Right.
and I can't flip them all.
Maybe they're already flipping and they just don't look like
Yeah, and that's what I'm like.
it.
It just keeps going. This might as well happen, you know.
Yeah. And that's something that like I touched on with Will too, where it's like I don't have that, and I was trying to figure out what it was, and I think it's just like this natural discontent. Um, I don't know.
Uh,
I want to.
Constant
Yeah.
cognitive dissonance.
What's that? What's that? What about this? What if I mix these together? Like I'm just naturally curious to a point of not being able to let it go.
I think I have that same mindset or a similar mindset. I'm not going to say the same, but just pointed in a slightly. It's got a different filter on it.
Excellent way to word it. What would
Like
your
I'm shot
filter
with a
guide you toward?
like I'm shot with a blue lens instead of you're shot with a yellow one. Like, well, that's what I'm trying to think and articulate because I know, just based on talking to you and knowing you, that ours are different, but I can't put exactly how. I'm
Well, I
trying to
definitely
think.
think we both come from different perspectives, like anybody, like
Hmm.
everybody.
Right.
Um,
Or I
but
guess what mine is directing me towards,
right,
as you
what
said.
is your attention on?
Right. That's what I'm. Predictability, I suppose.
Hmm.
Because with here, let me show you this real quick. I hope this doesn't mess with your recording at all. Um, take that wallpaper for instance. That
Okay.
is a bunch of proton collisions, and I'm interested in figuring out, if you shoot this one at this speed at this angle, is it always going to go that way? Is it going to go a different way? Like, you know, maybe choosing one thing and focusing on it and learning about it and moving on to the next,
Yeah.
if that
But
makes any
when do
sense.
you move on to the next?
Right. And I'm really bad at concretely articulating my thoughts. So
I think I think everyone is. If
I
they're
don't know.
not, I want to know what language they speak and have them teach it to me.
Right. You know, usually when I'm satisfied, I guess.
um, that's something where, again, just yesterday, I was racing through different thoughts. And I don't know, I feel like other people have to be somewhat like this, at least some people, maybe not. But I'll think about like more than one thing at a time, and maybe not at a time, like simultaneously, but like bouncing between them.
Mm-hmm.
Like a whole bunch of thoughts just like rushing back and forth down like all these different alleyways and then like skipping between. So it's just like my mind is here and then it's there and then it's on this and then this person pops into my head and it's just like racing through this stuff. That in
Mm.
like any couple seconds span, I'm covering a bunch of topics, maybe not in depth. And
Right.
it's like switching the channels between like six
Yeah.
channels
Oh,
on the
I know
remote
what you
like
mean.
really fast.
Mm-hmm.
And then Shelly's like, well, what are you thinking about? And I was just like,
I mean, where do I start?
and she's like, what, you don't want to tell me? And it was like, I'm just trying to translate all of that information that was in my head into words. Like, it's
Right.
going to take me a second.
Oh yeah.
Because if you switch through like four different TV channels really quick and you knew three of the shows and one of them you didn't know what it was, how do you explain what you just saw in the last 3 seconds?
Mm-hmm.
That's going to take you a while and you're not going to do a really good job unless you're going to spend way more time explaining it than you did perceiving it.
Right. So that's interesting that you say that because I was gonna tell you a way that I think about my own thoughts is I'm satisfied when I'm able to replicate this event successfully and accurately enough times proportional to the amount of energy that I have expended in exploring this certain activity.
Excellent. And it sounds like you're closer to my philosophies on, I'll say, at least personal existence, but I apply them to every level of existence, than Will is with our recent conversation.
Yeah.
Because I look at the energy input versus output. The input for when I was thinking about stuff was incredibly more efficient than the output of that information would have been. It would have taken a lot more time and a lot more energy through words, through trying to explain, trying to understand what she's getting of what I'm saying, of like back and forth, that you have to like that I feel like had a negative output of energy if I was going
Right.
to describe that.
Yeah. And so that's my reasoning for being like, for not thinking about some of the same things as in-depthly as you do.
Fair enough. And I think that's appropriate.
Right. And I think we have that uh what is it? Not interchangeably, but
Oh, definitely. I don't think
mhm.
about a lot of the things you think about in detail, in
Right.
as much detail.
Like it's a different filter. Like back
Yeah.
to what I
Yeah.
mhm.
And then I wonder if we could remove these filters.
That's yeah,
And does it just water everything down? Because like
right.
if you have a hose and it's just running and you just have the water shooting out, but if you plug your thumb over it, now it sprays out. And maybe we have to learn how to plug our hose so that it like launches us into what we want. Or if you remove that filter, if you had that same force, just more of it coming through, would be pretty
Mhm.
neat. Like,
That
is it a capacitor on the front end or on the back
right.
end?
Yeah, that makes me think about the whole people like the concept of enlightenment or nirvana or God or reaching this state or doing
Is
this.
removing the filters?
Yeah, I think it's kind of the uh same principle,
Yeah,
I should say, for lack of a better
I would
term.
agree. I would agree. Um, still, still curious of that one. Like, what's that like? Let me try.
Yeah, yeah.
I wonder if it's better than this one.
Yeah.
Or just
Who's to say?
different. Like, I'm not even looking for better all the time. Just looking
Right.
for different comparison.
Hmm.
Where that's something, a lot of times I've gone into restaurants or whatever, like, usually, I don't know, I don't go out to eat that much. Or even if I were to get like a Subway sandwich, is a great example. Go in and they ask, like, what do you want? And I'd be like, make me a good sandwich. And
Hmm.
some people are like, what do you want? Um, And then other people are like, anything, like any food allergies? And I'm like, nope, free reign. Like, you know what's better here than I do. Like, make me something good. And they're going to have different preferences than I do. But I might like that. And I
Right.
might not. And it's just a sandwich. Like, how many of them am I going to eat in my life? A lot. So if there's one I don't like, big deal. I'll be fine. It's still food that my body's going to break down and rebuild. That I did that with all different times of going out to get food. It's like, what do you want? Like, surprise me. Like, I don't know. Like,
Hmm.
let me see what it's like. Or yeah, sometimes I would make up different combinations, but I liked finding out what other people liked.
Right.
Um, and I really liked some of them. Some of them were super good, and I didn't like some of them. And I was like, yeah, I wouldn't order this again.
That reminds me of one of my sticky notes I wrote down with the whole domestication idea. He's like,
Nice. I'll pull up my
we
notes as well.
become a copy of so and so and so and so. It was my I think the brain being like the Grand Canyon analogy. We're like a crevasse without water, and as we grow, the water flows in different directions.
Mm-hmm. And then
What does
if
someone
it's
else's mold look like? What does that look like?
Yeah, and you have to look at all the different things that led to it getting there. And something that I think about is with the river analogy, the Grand Canyon probably doesn't deviate too much.
Yep.
it probably follows a fairly consistent. You could probably draw it on a map and it'd be pretty accurate for the next
Mhm.
couple of years, maybe longer. But the Yellowstone River, if you were to map every little twist and turn on that, you'd be wrong within a couple of months
Right. Yeah. You
because
actually brought up the same
the
point.
land moves. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I
It's
think
a
that
really
same thing happens for people who are still early in their development.
mhm.
Is you haven't set that course deep enough. You haven't eroded enough of the earth through hard rock to have a stance of this is who I am.
Right.
And
A good
this is the
analogy
way
for
I
it
flow through life.
is like air dry clay.
How so?
You know, like when you first take it out of the plastic tub or whatever that's airtight, you can mold it as much as you want, but as time goes on, more of your uh, movements to sculpt this piece of clay are gonna they're gonna be more prevalent later when it's dry. You know,
Yeah.
like if I go like this when it's closer to being dry, it's probably gonna be flatter and more vertical and
It'll take a lot
horizontal.
more work and you can't even undo some of it later.
Yeah. Yep.
Which, I haven't really thought of that perspective on people or animal on unlearned behaviors before.
Right.
It's
Thoughts.
like, what if, like, how do you fill in the Grand Canyon to make it take a different path?
Hmm.
You have
Oh,
a
excuse me.
lot of filling in.
Connor's home. I'm just gonna close my door real
Oh,
quick.
no worries. You have to fill in a lot of earth with really, really, really solid earth. Otherwise, that same path is going to erode again. You'll get that same pathway to just reform unless you fill in a ton of earth and re-guide it in a different direction, which is going to take some serious work and resources. So
Hmm.
the further you've developed into your ways, the more work you're going to have to change them.
Right.
And then you also, using these river analogies further, is sometimes there's different materials that the water's flowing over that are softer or harder than stuff next to them. And then cliff
Right.
faces form and like all this different stuff of like the water's going to follow a path of least resistance, but it's also going to erode the sides of where it is. And maybe this
Hmm.
shoreline is softer than that shoreline, so it's going to erode down this shoreline more. And that's going to pull the river in that direction because it's going to be washing that away to make room for more water. That there's like this constant forming and reforming that happens, and to change it is dependent on a lot.
Oh yeah.
It's more than you just steer this way or that way. You have to overcome something,
Right.
unless you're still very fresh and green, never rushed through hard rock to form a solid path that you take. If you're more flexible, like again, the Yellowstone River is pretty flexible in areas, and then there's an area near where I grew up, Winding Brook Farm, and the river just it's a brook, but it cuts back and forth so many times in so many ways, and it changes so much, but
Hmm.
not a ton either because of it's not rushing real fast.
Right.
That if you were to like flood that for like a month straight, I bet it would look totally different. um, and yeah, I had never applied that to human behaviors and development,
Right.
but I like it.
It makes me think again, relating back to my own life that I can see is that I don't really care which direction the river goes. I'm more concerned with what's in the river, what makes up the river, what kind of fish are in this, how
Yeah,
is
can your river support life? How like
mhm, how does this like affect certain rocks? Does it make one smoother? Does it tend to, have this mineral concentration in this area? What have you? Oh,
Hmm.
it's interesting.
Yeah, you could have an essentially dead river, a river that doesn't support life.
Hmm.
Um, or maybe minimal life. I don't know if it could be
Right.
totally toxic. It would have to be toxic. Like you could have dead water with no free oxygen for animals to live on. But then you'd probably get a lot of plant growth.
Right.
Um,
And I suppose, if you have water that's just, well, like distilled water, yeah, that's devoid of all.
right.
you know,
It doesn't have the minerals in it.
It makes you think there's probably still stuff in there. And if you left it
My
alone, there would
dad
still
could
be.
actually give an excellent talk on that subject.
I was gonna
Um,
say, I bet, you know.
I remember one time, I think I was in college. I think I just started college. But my parents had gotten, and I might not have been in college yet, I might have been a senior in high school, gotten a separate, just for filling up your water, like glass faucet attached to the sink. So you had the main
Mhm.
faucet that you used to wash dishes, but then next to it was like you flip the little black lever and just the little stream
Yeah, right.
comes out of like the 100% purified drinking water.
Hmm.
And my dad had this cool little tool that it was just like this tray that had a little indentation for some water you put in, and then you like hit this lever and a needle goes up based on how many impurities there are in the water.
Oh, interesting.
And he showed me, he took it out of the regular faucet head in our sink that we had been using to drink water out of my whole life living there.
Hmm.
And it went up to, I don't remember the numbers, but I'm just going to throw a random number out of like, it went up to like 10 or maybe 8.
Hmm.
And he said that the average home is around 20, so, or 15. And again, these numbers are arbitrary right now.
Right.
Not totally arbitrary, but
No, I know what you mean. It's just
they have a pattern to them, but they're probably not accurate for the measurement of this tool. And he's like, so we're already like, this is better than the average home in New Jersey for the cleanliness of water, the number of impurities. And then he dumped that out and cleaned out the little dish, and then he put water in from the new faucet that he had just had attached to the sink
Hmm.
and presses the little button, and the needle doesn't move at all. It just sits
No
there.
way. Wow.
Because there was no impurities in that water to allow, like, I'm assuming it was an electrical current is probably how they did it, because
Hmm.
if you have totally distilled H2O, it's an insulator rather than a conductor.
Right. Yeah.
Like, and that I think is so counterintuitive to so many people. They're like, no, you want to get out of the water when there's a thunderstorm. I'm like, yeah, because that water is not distilled. It's got a ton of impurities in it, and that the electricity uses that to get through the pathway. But
Right.
this was totally distilled water, and I could not drink it and enjoy it.
Really?
I did not enjoy the taste of it.
Huh.
I continued to use the sink because I liked the taste of that water better.
That's funny. Huh.
That the pure distilled H2O, it tasted weird to me.
Right.
Um, and I don't know. There's probably people who maybe it's an acquired taste. I don't know. But I was like, no, I want that water. I want our well water.
Mm.
Um, and I think drinking out of a mountain stream is like one of the most refreshing, like best tasting things you could ever drink.
Yeah.
And a lot of other people are like, that's gross, or they're like, it's just cold water. What difference does it make? And for me, it tastes different. But I'm
Hmm.
also someone who I do believe I drink more water than the average American.
You do drink a lot of water.
Um, and not just fluids. I might not consume more fluids than the average person, but most of the fluids I drink is just water.
Hmm.
I'm drinking a ginger ale right now, but I have water right here too. I got filled it up again before we started. I think just yesterday and the day before, I think I drank between 10 and 12 of the 8-ounce glasses that you're supposed to
Oh,
have a
wow.
day.
Huh.
That it's like I drink a lot of water. I also think I need a lot because one, I'm really tall. Two, I have super high metabolism that I think my body's it's using it in some way or another.
Right.
That if I don't hydrate all the time, I don't feel as good. And I notice that, and it affects me in how well I function. And it probably does that to other people too, but they probably just function well enough without as much water. I need more of it to feel well enough to function in a way
Yeah,
that
I totally.
I'm okay with.
Right. I'm I think I'm the same way. I just I like my water to be really really clean.
Clean of what?
I mean, I'm probably one of the people who would enjoy the distilled water
Okay. Clean of everything.
thing.
Yep. I'm I'm fine with stuff in my water.
Yeah. I mean, that's why I have, I bought the filtered water pitcher and I have my, where is it? Back there, little Life straw water bottle.
Nice. Another thing that I found funny was a couple of different times I was at friends' houses, and ever since I was a kid, I just drank a lot of water. I wanted water. It's like, do you want iced tea? It's like, no, I didn't like iced tea at all as a kid. And they're like, do you want
Hmm.
Coke? I was like, no, I didn't like Coke either. Like some sodas I really enjoyed. I drank juice way more than you should drink juice, but I mostly just drank water. And so if I was like ever eating at a friend's house or hanging out, it's like I would get a glass and fill it up with water. And some of them were the types of families that always had a water pitcher that had a filter and that was in the fridge. But I would still fill mine up at the sink because it was habit. Or they
Hmm.
were the families that would have water bottles because they didn't want to have to filter their water because it wasn't very good. But I still went to their sink because it was habit.
Right.
And like some of the houses, they had sulfur in their water to a certain extent, where it was like had that rotten egg smell, and you could like taste the sulfur a little bit. And I
Hmm.
would still drink the water. And I remember one of the times one of my friend's parents was like, "How can you drink that water when your dad like does the water softening system stuff?" And like to me, I was so confused. It's like, what do you mean? This is just water.
Huh.
Like it's clean enough to drink, so I'm gonna drink it.
Right.
When in their mind, they're like, how could you drink it with that stuff in there? That's disgusting because we didn't get that system yet. We talked to your dad and we're doing this alternative and we do this for our drinking water instead.
Hmm.
And I was just like, what? Why do you care that this is in there? It's water. You need it. Like, I'm going to
Hmm.
drink it or I'll not feel good.
There
So
you
like
go.
for me, the cost benefit like was so greatly outweighed by having water in my system
Right. Okay. I hear you.
that I wonder if that's how people feel about beer. Maybe that's why people like beer.
Eh.
Because to me, I have a sip of beer and I'm like, this is gross. I'm not drinking that. How are you drinking that?
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying now. Okay.
That
I'm
in their
tracking you.
mind, they're like, no, it's good. It's beer. Like, I love beer. That I just do
You
that with
just like how it
water,
makes you
even if
feel.
it's crappy tasting and got sulfur in it or whatever. It's like, no, I'm still going to drink
Right,
it.
that's what I. And maybe I'm just a germaphobe, but I'm like, I do not want to put that in my body. It needs to be pure.
Oh, well, there's the like microbiology rabbit hole that as people start to go down it, they freak out, become germaphobes, and everything is disgusting.
I think
And then a
that's.
little bit deeper down, you hit a level of, oh, that's all already happening, and I'm powerless against it, so whatever.
I think I can't tell if I'm like already there or if I'm right on the edge. I don't know.
So one of the kids I lived with was a microbiology major,
Hmm.
and then he was friends with a lot of other microbiology majors, and a lot of them were germaphobes, and it was really funny. I got a
Hmm.
pretty big kick out of that, where it's just like you understand all this stuff, so now you're disgusted by it when it was already happening. You were already involved in it, and like, did it have an effect on your life? Yeah, actually, probably it did, but you
Right.
didn't notice, so you didn't care. But now that you know, uh-uh.
Right. And that leads back to the whole perception thing. Maybe it didn't
Yeah.
until.
Oh, a funny story with that was there was this lady at the in the staff lounge at the one school I work. And so every Friday, different teams and departments in the school bring in some breakfast food for all of the staff. And they like rotate through on the Friday. So it's just like a nice, like, hey, I'm going to make food this week and then you'll make it next week type of thing. And then they have these cool dishes that people bring in. It's like a
Hmm.
potluck, but designated who's going to be a part of it. Or bringing the food. Everyone's a part of it. And one of the ladies, I guess she's made this dish multiple times because other people knew about it, but it was like some rhubarb something crumble. And it was like, I don't know, it was like a casserole dish that was like
Mhm.
really good breakfast thing. And it was it followed all these like crazy dietary restrictions. So pretty
Interesting.
much anybody could eat it.
So it was like vegan and
It was vegan, it was
gluten-free and
gluten
all that.
free, it was devoid of like a lot of the things that people have allergies to.
Interesting.
But it
Okay.
still had like 13 ingredients, which was
Oh
pretty
wow.
impressive that it was
That's
able
sweet.
to
Yeah.
like hit all of those restrictions
Right.
with so many ingredients. It was pretty cool, but it was super good, and everyone was talking about it. And I was in there at lunchtime because I was busy in the morning, so I wasn't able to go in for breakfast. But I'm in there
Mhm.
at lunchtime, and there's a couple of us in there, but there's another teacher that's in there on her lunch, and she's like grading papers or like filling out progress reports or whatever. And she had a mug that she had just scooped some of this stuff into, just because it was convenient rather than getting like a plate or something. Because she was just like
Mhm.
eating a little with the spoon as she was doing her work. And she ate all of what was in the mug, went back to get a whole nother serving of it. And as she starts to scoop it into her mug, she sees the little sheep talking about how this like abides by all these dietary restrictions for people, but she listed all the ingredients just in case that someone still had something in there that they couldn't have or didn't want to have for whatever reasons, just to
Mhm.
be kind to them. Like, here's the recipe, just if you
Right.
want to know what's in it so you can know if you can eat it or not. So she starts reading that as she's scooping more into her mug for her
I think I
next
see where
round.
this is going.
And she goes, "Wait, this is rhubarb? I hate rhubarb." And a bunch of us sitting there started laughing. We're like, apparently not anymore. Like, not when it's cooked like this. And she's like, "No, I can't eat this. This is disgusting." And she scooped what was in her mug into the garbage. And I was like, "Wait, no, you're being for real right now." Like,
Oh wow.
and she was like, "No, rhubarb is gross. I can't eat rhubarb." And I was
But
like,
then what?
wow, this is deep rooted because you just enjoyed a whole cup of
Oh yeah.
it. You
That
can
makes
eat
me think.
rhubarb. You can enjoy rhubarb. I just watched you do it
Mhm.
literally moments ago. And now you're telling me that this is disgusting and you don't like it.
Right.
That it was like, no, that's perception.
Hmm. Yep.
You had an idea in your head that you didn't like rhubarb. And when
Hey
you
Brian.
didn't, what's up?
Sorry to interrupt real quick. I have to get going to work in the next half
No
hour or
worries.
so.
Perfect.
Yeah.
That was when I was planning on wrapping up anyway.
Okay.
So, do you have work at 5?
I would have to leave at 5.
Okay, perfect. No, we're still on track.
Okay, good deal.
Awesome. But yeah, that goes back to what you're saying about like it's subjective. If you or like the acquired taste for beer, you decide if you like that taste or not.
Mhm.
Where you could also have a natural tendency for something or a preference, but I think you can change that based on experiences that you have in association with it. And I forget the psychology term for that, where there's
Mhm.
something along the lines of when you have two things that happen in association with each other, you now always associate them together.
Oh
Um,
God, I memorized that term
yeah,
like
I was tested on
last
it
2
so many
semesters
times,
ago,
and
and I
I probably got it right on all the tests because I was
yeah, I don't
studying
remember
before
it
the
now
test.
though.
But the classic example that a lot of people can relate to is the smell of tequila. A lot of people, I guess, they drink too much tequila and get really sick. Tequila is the one alcohol that I'm like, no, I could drink that. And I still feel like crap, and I'm like, I'm not going to drink any more of this. It's like
Hmm.
doesn't do it for me, but I don't have that negative association that I guess if I say tequila is the fine alcohol and people are like, but you don't drink, but you like tequila, that's the one everyone hates. I'm like, what?
Mhm.
Why does everyone hate it? And
Right.
because they drink too much, they get sick, they puke, and then they associate tequila with being very sick and ill, and their body's like, nope, we don't like that. You
Mhm.
don't like that anymore. You don't like rhubarb, even if you're
You don't
enjoying
like
it.
rhubarb. Yep.
um,
I mean, I would say classical conditioning, but that's a different thing.
yeah, but it's the same principle,
Yeah.
underlying mechanism anyway.
Right.
It's an association,
Yeah, I was just gonna say association.
and I just always associated water, regardless of how it tasted. Warm water is a tough one.
Yeah.
I have a hard time with warm water, and I think that has to do with like water that's moving all the time usually is pretty cold. Water that sits still, you don't want to drink still
Right. The
standing
stagnant.
water. Stagnant
I
water you
can
don't put in your body.
I can do warm water. I can do it probably a little more easily than cold water, I would say. Really cold water.
Really cold water, you have to drink kind of slow.
Yeah. Or
It,
colder, I should say.
but like colder water, like there's some condensation on the outside of my glass, I will drink that whole glass in like 2 seconds. I love
Hmm.
it. And then I'll want another one.
Yeah, I can do warm water.
Awesome.
Hmm.
But for the sake of time and you being able to get ready for work and heading out to work, let's go through a nice relaxed reflection period.
Okay. Sure. Let me lean back for this.
Nice. One of the first reflections I have is I've got to structure things like talking about a book or a chapter of a book
Mm-hmm.
if I'm going to accomplish it.
Right.
Um, because I like going with the flow too much.
Huh.
I like seeing where things go. That I'm like, okay, if I'm going to cover this, it has to be more intentional.
That brings up a reflection for me. That's interesting. Oh, are you done with your?
No, but I'm listening to you.
Okay, yeah, no, it's like I mean, that's really easy for me. Like I can go and switch and be like, all right, let's have this structure right now, and then just turn it off or turn it on. I
Yeah.
don't need to. I guess that's just the way I live my life. I don't need to think about it beforehand to have a really rigid structure.
Yeah, structure is something I have always seemed to struggle with as far as I can remember.
Hmm.
I just I don't know. I think I've been thinking about that a lot actually, and I think part of the reason I contemplate things so much, part of the reason I spend so much time in my head, part of the reason I'm not structured is I had a very safe childhood.
Mm,
I didn't worry about like I was always safe. I was safe from my parents. I was gonna have food. I was gonna have shelter. I was gonna have all of my basic needs met all of the time.
mm,
Um, that I didn't worry about anything where I needed to have structure, where I needed to think
right.
about what I was gonna do next because oh this isn't working. Hey mom. Hey dad. Hey JP or Tim. Like there was always there's someone there who could help me out all the time.
Mm.
That I didn't develop the skill of structure. I even abused the other end of it because I could.
I was gonna say it's making me draw parallels to my own life that, I had quite the opposite. And that's why I'm not blessed with the noon athleticism gift that you can just go like, "Oh, I've never done this sport before and you're amazing at it." And like that's
That one
awesome.
I think is I have met a few people like that, but that one is more unique than just environmental.
I think it's you can just dive headfirst into things and you always seem to do them correctly and efficiently. And I think
Right, and
that's
I
part of
think
your
that
go with the
a
flow thing.
part of it is being able to go with the flow. Another part is that's what me and my brothers and my dad taught us, but that's what we did. We were always active and we were always learning and we were always trying to get better and we were trying to do the next thing, but not
Hmm.
to be better than anyone, but just to keep striving for the next level of it, like self competition
Right.
of being the best we could be at it and finding it fun. That the athleticism piece, the coordination piece, the figuring it out right away first try piece. Like I remember on JP's boat, he has these fishing rod holders that lock in on these little things on the side.
Hmm.
And the first time that I went out in the boat with him, he had been going out in it for a while, but I'd been out here in Montana, but I was back visiting and I went out in the boat with him and
Hmm.
I went to take the fishing pole holder off the side and went to take it off. I'm like, that's not how that works. So then I did something different and then I did it and I took it off and I was like, oh, okay, there it goes. And JP starts cracking up, and I was like, what? And he's like, you're the only person who's figured out, and I've taught my friends countless times how to do that, and they still can't do it, and I have to do it for them every time. He's like, and
That's
it took
pretty
you
funny.
2 seconds, and you figured it out. And
Huh.
Tim apparently can do it too, where it's just the type of thing where we just figure that out, and it just seems easy to us. I have a friend here in Bozeman, Chad Johnson. He can do that with things. Mike is actually similar to that. He's just kind of gotten a little more complacent and lazy in his since college. He's slowed down. But Mike was the type of person you could throw any sport at him or any game or any activity. Same with this kid Chad. Both of those people, they can do it probably better than most people who've been playing for a while. They'll just pick it up and they'll just be good at it.
Right.
And that's that you say is that noon thing. I don't think that's just from circumstance. I think there's some other drive in there I haven't figured out. But I do think that you could have whatever I had, and you put me in a really stressful childhood, I probably wouldn't be as good at stuff.
Right.
And I would probably have more structure, and I probably wouldn't be okay going with the flow because I wouldn't feel good. It wouldn't feel safe.
Mhm.
That I need to, I guess, maybe hold some intention in what direction I'm going to follow the flow, if you will, if I have an idea of what I want to cover, like this chapter of a book that I didn't even touch on.
Sorry, I'm hearing some yelling coming from.
Interesting.
I think
Yeah, I'm
Connor's
just glad the
upset about
dog
something.
stopped barking. There was a dog walking down the street. Other reflections. I will definitely say that I'm fascinated by what quantum physics is learning.
Oh,
and how my reality may strictly be a result of my consciousness and doesn't make it not real, but the realness for me may strictly be based on my conscious awareness of it, and the objective truth rather than my subjective truth, I don't know, could just be a bunch of like music, just sound waves. Like,
It's all vibration.
on some level, I think it is. I just don't understand how it makes all these patterns.
Right.
And then as soon as you throw an observer into it, it's like pops into a physical world. And it's like,
Right.
what? What do you mean? And how do you measure the difference between the two? That's something I should look into a little more. Maybe I'll have something on that for the next time we talk.
Right.
Other reflections for you?
I'm still trying to figure out how to organize my thoughts and have them come out in a way that I want them to. And I think it's a continual process for me. But I think these talks are helping.
Yeah,
we haven't
me
had,
too.
Consistent talks like this for a while.
No, this
and now
is...
that we're starting to again, it's, some of the dust is being brushed off.
Going back to me going with the flow and not being scheduled, I've actually started using the calendar on my smartphone for these talks because
Nice.
I've been doing enough of them that it's like, I don't remember when I told this person I would talk to them, but it's scheduled and we're going to do it. So I've been keeping track of it. That's like a very structured thing for me, where other people are like, that's trivial. Like, that's your structure. I'm like, yeah, that's how loose it was.
Yeah. Right.
But I've been getting so much out of these talks, and not a lot of people are listening to them. I don't really care. People can listen to them. They cannot listen to them. That's not why I'm doing this. I'm getting so much out of these.
Oh yeah,
because
me too.
it's helping me articulate my thoughts and communicate them, and it doesn't come out the way I want it to most of the time. I think that's just the nature of talking, at least for me. But I'm getting some good points across, but I'm exploring my own thoughts, and I'm getting deeper into what I've got going on, that I'm finding great benefit of this experience. And it's just talking.
Oh yeah.
I don't know why I keep posting them on the internet, but that's fun too, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's cool. It's cool to see feedback always.
Yeah. But it's been really neat to look back and listen to.
Right. Yeah,
the
some
one
self
the other recordings,
reflection.
where it's
Yeah.
funny how easy it is to follow the conversation, just as easy as it was to have the conversation.
Right. Yeah.
But it like you said, I think for me it really helps me articulate my ideas,
Oh yeah.
and how to communicate them in a more succinct fashion.
Definitely. Definitely so.
It doesn't always give me answers
No, but
though.
I don't know if it needs to for me. I think, you know.
Hmm. Yeah, I want some answers.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a big drive for me. Is
Hmm.
again, it's that curiosity.
Right.
I'm fine with more questions as long as I get some answers.
Yeah, there you go.
um, but yeah, that's my reflection for today.
Now that was, I think that's a good reflection from me as well.
Awesome. On that note, we are off.